Camden County, Brandon Marshall Wisdom case, sex crimes, terrible story, was released last week. Charges were dropped and outrage ensued here locally. And I know that Lake Expo had a lot more research and sat down. And when you look at the article they put out, I thought that told a pretty good story of what took place.
Yeah, they said when Brandon Wisdom was arrested in February of 2024 and charged with multiple sex crimes against a minor, the details in the probable cause document, it made it sound like a slam dunk case, right? Everybody thought, oh, well, they got this guy cold, right? So from sexually explicit images shared through the Kick Social message app obtained by investigators to Wisdom's own alleged confession, the evidence outlined by the Camden County Sheriff's Office investigator seemed overwhelming. Again, this is February of 2024, right? Everybody thought, okay, got this guy, slam dunk. But this week, the charges against Wisdom, the child molestation and sexual misconduct, were dropped, right? To everybody's shock and outrage and all of that, they were dropped. The case vanished from the CaseNet, which is Missouri's online case tracking system. Individuals connected to the situation were bewildered by all of this. That turned to outrage with that. Outrage and anger directed to the Camden County Prosecutor, Rochelle Grosvenor, whose office filed the case to be dismissed. Okay, so Rochelle, all of a sudden, right in the middle of this, and everybody apparently blaming her because it looked like a slam dunk early, but Grosvenor says she's angry too. She laid the blame for the dismissal squarely on the Camden County Sheriff's Office, saying the investigators there mishandled evidence in the case, and that's part of a larger problem in that office. Camden County Sheriff's Office mismanaged the evidence in the case to the point that it would not be admissible in court, and therefore there was no evidence to show proof beyond a reasonable doubt, she wrote in a fiery press release late Tuesday afternoon. So again, all of this is blowing up and people blame the prosecutor because they thought it was a slam dunk, but then Rochelle, the prosecutor, is saying, hey, I can't do anything if they mishandle the evidence and I can't bring a case. So it's all kind of just nuts right now. It's a he said, she said kind of a thing.
Right, and it's kind of uncommon to see, like, you know, a prosecutor be this vocal and come out, especially with a press release, and essentially point the finger, which was interesting. And she also went on KRMS's Morning Magazine Thursday, October 2nd, with Tony Herman, and I thought that she did, you know, a good job kind of laying out the legal process and explaining. One of the things that she said was in the probable cause statement that the names that were redacted that people saw online, right? And I think it's important to keep in mind that, you know, a lot of times when we have any kind of heinous crimes, our emotions are very heightened.
Yeah.
I'd say especially in those of nature with children,
Yep.
a lot of times with animals, a lot of times with elderly, but especially when it comes to kids in this thing. And so considering the charges that were listed, when you see the probable cause statement with names redacted, you could be led to believe that these crimes were being committed against a minor. However, when you look closer and listening to the interview with the prosecutor and Tony Herman from Thursday with KRMS, it, from my understanding, was not the child, but rather the wife at the time that a lot of these things were listed. And so I don't argue that the Brandon Wisdom is a sick individual, and the mother may have had some blame here. I'm not sure. There's a lot of back and forth. I'm not a legal expert, but I did hear this in the probable cause statement, that the mother and father wanted to get caught in the act and would have intercourse with the victim in the room. And so that, to me, paints a little bit of a picture of the mindset of these two individuals. And so I think there's a major misunderstanding in the crimes that were committed, and the community's understanding of what actually took place are factually incorrect. I don't see the prosecutor's office having anything to gain from this, and a lot of times in the legal process, looking at what the sheriff's office said and the way they responded, and we have mishandled evidence and cases and working on improving that. Well, obviously, if the evidence brought to a prosecutor to bring somebody to prosecute them with charges, that would always be the desired outcome for a prosecutor and a sheriff's office. They're supposed to be working in cahoots to make that possible, keep violent, dangerous individuals off the streets, protecting our kids. However, there is a legal process that has to take place when that happens. And so it seems to me that somewhere along the line, the legal process is not coming full circle, and it's making it harder. When you look at the prosecutor of Camden County under the direction of Rochelle Grosvenor, it looks like she does bring charges quite regularly, and it does look like some of the cases more frequently that are dropped come from Camden County. It's important to remember it's not only Camden County Sheriff's Office that the Camden County Prosecutor fields cases from. And I find out in listening to this interview that some of the assistant prosecutors in that office have 700 cases in some instances on their desk or in the pipeline. That seems to me crazy. And so I would think with those cases, it's going to be important to have good evidence. And so over this one, the individual was released. And as we said, outrage absolutely ensued. I'm just not so sure that the outrage is currently being directed in the right direction. But I will say this, it's not uncommon for people to be very angry with prosecutors and judges and county sheriffs and things of that nature. It is a little uncommon to see so much vocal back and forth and pointing the finger, but sometimes I'd rather see that in front of the public instead of it going on behind closed doors.
Yeah, and in this situation, the sheriff is Chris Edgar right now of Camden County, but he was not the sheriff when all of this started. He
Correct.
was not the sheriff at the time that apparently broke the chain of evidence, you know, that blew out a lot of the evidence in the case. That was Tony Helms at the time that this happened. So the current sheriff, Chris Edgar, is dealing with what the past sheriff,
Correct.
Tony Helms, did and blew the case, although it's making the current sheriff look bad because right now all this is blowing up. And Chris Edgar said there were some mistakes made on this. We'll own up to that. He said, did I see a lot of issues prior to taking office? Yes. He added, noting his office has made tough decisions on personnel because of prior issues. He says his team has since corrected every one of the actions that were issues. So let's hope that's the case. I think he's talking personnel there. Let's hope they figure out the chain of command and chain of evidence and all that stuff, because as you said, all of that is so important. You know, it's got to be all in place when you go to trial to make sure that it all stands up. I mean, the TV shows are all based on that, like, you know, your Law and Order shows. I mean, you've got the sheriff police side and the, you know, tracking the evidence, keeping the evidence, and then it goes to the prosecutor and they do their thing with all the evidence. It's all got to work together.
Yeah, well, I can tell you this, that there is outrage over this particular case, and Camden County Prosecutor's Office is getting a lot of that anger directed in their direction. It'll be interesting to see, with the Prosecutor's Office being so vocal, what we hear back from Camden County Sheriff Chris Edgar. And in regards to, like, the important thing is, like, if this is an issue that was back then, has it been rectified, and do we feel confident moving forward?
Yeah.
That investigations and cases will be handled properly. And if this was a case of that, could we go back and use this as a learning experience and let's set precedent moving forward so we don't see crazy, dangerous, sick individuals being released? It is also worth noting that the defendant, Brandon Marshall Wisdom, sat in jail for 19 months nearly, you know, and so that was a long time. And I'm sure that had they been able to bring charges, rightfully so, he would have spent a much longer time behind bars. But that is the way this went, and it looked like the Camden County Sheriff's Office said they were still working on investigation and trying to bring charges to this. It'll be interesting to see what they could do now they haven't been able to do the last, you know, 2 years or 19 months.
And I do think there's been a pretty good relationship between the prosecutor's office and the sheriff's office, certainly in current times. Hopefully that will continue and they'll work on this together because they got to get it figured out. I mean, if they drop the ball on something that slam dunk, then they got to figure some things out and get it cleaned up over there. Hopefully they're working on that.